Welcome to the People Leaders Podcast, the audio resource for managers and business leaders creating high-performing teams. Join leadership and team development experts Jan and Michelle Turkelson each week as they explore both subjects from every angle. Through practical tips, valuable insights, and compelling interviews with leadership experts around the world, you'll learn how to bring out the best in your staff and how to give your best as a leader.
Welcome back to the People Leaders Podcast. I'm Jan Turkelson.
And I'm Michelle Turkelson. And today we're going to continue our look at the 8 dimensions of the high-performing team through the prism of our high-performing team assessment tool.
So if you haven't already, we really encourage you to listen to the previous episodes where we gave an overview of the high-performing team assessment tool and took a deep dive into the first dimension, which was direction. And this is something that you could actually listen to with your team as a team-building activity. So without further ado, let's take a look now at the second dimension, which are interactions.
So very excited about this one. We're going to have a look at one of the dimensions of the high-performing team assessment, which is interactions. We've called it interactions. It's all about how the team members interact with one another. Another way to frame it up is looking at the interpersonal relationships that exist amongst the team members. This is number two for a reason, because you have a look at the work that we do with teams. It's either about the task, they've got issues with the task, or issues with the people.
Yeah, and more often than not, it is the people.
Yes, definitely, and this is where the people leader plays such an important role, because if they are not helping team members give and receive feedback to one another in a constructive way, can spiral out of control. So people leader has a really important role actually in helping the interactions flow, it be constructive in a team environment.
And I think he really sets the standard and that expectation of this is the way we are going to do things around here. And the challenge for people leaders is that they still have to get work done, but they get work done through people. And so for a people leader, having those regular interactions that are constructive, just like quick check-ins with people, are going to develop a high-performing, standard.
Yeah, and having said that, you said, the people leader sets the tone for the team. So true. So if you are a people leader, what are my interpersonal relationships like with other colleagues who manage other teams? So we know this is in a larger organisation I might be talking about here, but after a meeting and I'm not happy with the results, do I come back to my team and moan a little bit about the reaction, response or decision that was made? Because your team members are picking up on that all the time. You do absolutely, like you said, Jen, set the tone for the team. So let's have a look at the first one. So the first one is about there being a level of trust amongst team members with one another. So this word trust, in every workshop that we've ever done, respect and trust are always at the top of the list, aren't they, in terms of what's important for team members in order to have a successful team, or the qualities that they see are important in a successful team.
Yeah, so while you're listening to this, the question is, do you think you and your team have a high level of trust amongst the team? And how is that demonstrated?
Great.
So an example could be, I know that if I need to leave work early for an emergency or whatever, I know that my team members have my back. I know that someone is going to, I can ask them to do something, and even if they can't do it, they will find a way to get it done.
Yeah, and then when we've asked people, so what is this definition of trust for you? And you think it's never about, I don't trust to leave my purse out because they're going to steal something. It all comes down to their word is their bond. Like they do what they say they are going to do. That tends to be a key theme, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When people talk about trust in the workplace.
Yeah, because the element of authenticity for you. So again, if you're listening to this, how would you rate yourself around your word, and around being trustworthy?
Yeah, if I say I'm going to get something in on time, do I? Or am I consistently late with that? or am I more consistent with more senior people and the people who report to me? I don't necessarily follow through when I perhaps could or should.
Yeah, and also this idea of trust. Some of it is that the competency. Do I trust the level of competency that's in my team? And if not, what do I do about it?
Yeah.
You know, do I spend a little bit of time with my team member, coaching them and helping them and developing them, or do I just leave it up to them or the people leader? Because you are part of the culture in your team. So just check in with yourself. So am I contributing to this high level of trust?
Yeah, and is there evidence, like if I look around, can I see that there are, signs that we have a high level of trust amongst team members?
So if you were to use this in a team meeting scenario, that could be just one of the questions. What is the evidence? How do we demonstrate and display trust in our team?
That's a great one, Jen. I mean, the other thing is, how would we describe the word trust in our team as it relates to this team? So you could spend a whole hour just on this sort of question or phrase alone. Well, we could.
Yes.
Okay, so let's have a look at the next one, Jenny.
If people on the team have problems, they discuss them with each other. So this is an indicator of a high-performing team.
Yeah.
So it's not about... it's about being transparent, upfront, not, hiding things, not being avoidant.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things that come up for me here, and one of them is, so if they're not discussed, is it because it's a cultural thing within the team that, we just don't do that here? Or is it that the team members don't have the skill in order to do that? So there could be a couple of things at play if that isn't something that's happening within the team.
Yeah. So how I've seen it operate is a team have agreed as part of their charter and the way in which they're going to behave, that if one team member comes to another team member and complains about someone, they have 24 hours in which to bring that up with the person that they're complaining about. If not, the onus is on the person that they've spoken to go back to that person and go, okay, we need to take some action around this.
Fantastic. Because there is this idea that the team manager has to deal with, all those issues. The team problems, like they're the ones, and I see this all the time with very mature, and highly skilled people. Their first port of call is to go to the manager rather than the person that they have the issue with. And quite often the people leader feels, actually, isn't that my job? I need to deal with this, instead of actually giving that person the opportunity to solve their own problems first.
Yeah, because we're talking about high performers.
That's right.
And if you want to be a high-performing team, you need to be a high-performer
person. I know. So this doesn't... Yeah, so we're not saying that, it's not okay to go to your people leader. All we're saying is, you take the first step as a team member.
Okay, so is there a challenge for someone now? So is there something that has been happening in the last week or two, so with a team member or someone in your business or in your work environment, that you can actually approach and have a discussion with to demonstrate that you have that ability?
And I've seen this get a bit tricky for people leaders, because they get feedback from someone, either take it on face value, or they've seen evidence of it, and then have a conversation with the person who has had the complaint brought against them. Whereas potentially there is an opportunity for you as a people leader to become a bit of a mediator in this, and show them how you can solve a problem jointly. So you could really step into a leadership role here rather than take on the issue and deal with it, because you're only getting one side of the story if you're only hearing one person.
So the next one is that team members regularly give and receive feedback to one another.
Which totally relates to the previous one. Because unless you're doing it on a regular basis, then it can seem a little bit daunting. Oh God, somebody has consistently got this information wrong, or they're consistently not following through, or whatever it could be.
All right.
Yeah, all right. Now, that's right. It doesn't always have to be negative. That's so true, Jen.
Yeah.
So as a people leader, am I building a culture where I'm providing opportunities for people to give and receive feedback from one another? So it starts with me as a people leader. In my one-on-one catch-ups, for example, do I actually say, is there any feedback that you'd like to give me? So that feels like, oh my God, I don't think I could say that. You could say something like, is there something that I could be doing more of?
Or differently.
Yeah. And that's just starting the process of giving and receiving feedback. In a team meeting, for example, you could, at the end of each, is there some positive feedback that we'd like to give one another? Start with the positive, build on the strengths.
And even at the end of a team meeting, you can give feedback around the team meeting. So how would we rate this team meeting, how we did it? So it doesn't have to be
about
singular, it could be about that situation.
Correct.
Often,
start small.
Start small. Yeah. But practice. It actually takes practice. And even with you and I, if I want to give you feedback, I always say, Michelle, can I give you some feedback? Like I ask for permission, and sometimes you'll say no. Often you don't. You say yes. But there is something about being open to receiving the feedback, because if you want to give someone feedback and they are just not in the mood, don't waste your time. It's going to fall on deaf ears. So just pick your moment as well.
So, which leads to this whole issue of the answers in the team. Usually, if we were a team that were good at giving and receiving feedback, what would we need to do differently? So if we're not that good, is it a skill thing? Is it just practice?
Yeah. So for this week, could be, we're going to give each other feedback on just positive things that we see in each other, just for 1 week, to get the practice of stopping and noticing, being aware, having the language, to give feedback.
Yeah, and so I mean, this is a big. Well, I mean, we could spend a bit of time on this. So, what is? Okay, I'm going to give you feedback, but unless you have a bit of skill around, okay, so what is feedback? How do I do it in a I don't know, in a constructive way? Then you could just be, I don't know, dumping on someone.
Yeah, and I think we will do a podcast specifically on that, and we'll demonstrate what it looks like. But if we were to just give people, some key tips, it's focus on the behaviour, not the person.
That's right. What is the situation? Like, describe the situation. What is the behaviour that you saw, and what was the impact on you, for example?
And then maybe the next step. So next time, how do you want to do this? Yeah, okay, that's good. So the next dimension that we want to talk about in interactions is individual values are respected amongst all team members. And values are something that for some people is very important to them. Not everyone's values, I suppose, override everything that they do, but there are some personality types that values are really will affect relationships. So understanding what people's values are and what's important to them. More often than not, when we go around and we ask people what their most important values are, and values are something that are important to you, and your life demonstrates what your values are. So, for example, I'll say to someone, like, what are your top 3 values? And most of them, say family. Then it'll be maybe health and fitness, and could be financial independence or work or whatever. But you'll see what people's values are by how they organise their life and what they put their time and energy into. So, for example, I might say, education is really important to me, and then you might come into my home and you won't find any books or anything like that, but you'll find a wardrobe full of shoes. So, that life demonstrates that shoes are more important than
fashion.
That isn't the case, but I'm just saying no. But, your values are demonstrated by the physical surroundings and how you spend your time and money and energy.
True. And so some teams, you can see they do respect each other's values, from a religious point of view. There are, we're finding in corporates all the time, prayer rooms available for people. And these are religious values that people are respecting and acknowledging.
But even values around collaboration and sharing information.
Yeah.
So for someone, a value which is really important could be that my ideas are shared, that they're valued, that they're acknowledged, whereas for someone else it may not be that important. So there is a certain level of awareness that needs to happen. So if you're a people leader, perhaps that's something that you could work into a team meeting by just asking people, so we're just going to share what our important values are.
Yep, spot on. And so the last one, Jan, team member contributions, which means their information and ideas are recognised and utilised. Like, this is a no-brainer. So if this is engagement that you're after, you want to create a high-performing team, you can't do it alone. You have to be able to engage your team and to utilise the individual contribution that each team member can bring, because that is where, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, and notice that we've said recognised and utilised.
Yeah.
So recognised is that internal acknowledgement, so valuing, so that's a fundamental human need to be acknowledged and valued, and utilised is the physical demonstration of that. Now, some team members might come up with some ideas that you actually can't instigate. However, there is always something that you can be mindful of their idea, and also ask them about it. So you don't just have to accept ideas. Sometimes you actually work your way through it and question them about that.
I had a group once, if we just have a look at team member contributions are recognised and utilised, just this issue of recognising someone's unique contribution. We had a manager in the session just go around it was a round table, and went around and had spent some time sort of giving some thought to this at the beginning of a team day, and acknowledged everyone for the contribution that they had made to the team over the course of the year.
Beautiful.
It was brilliant. The impact that had on the rest of the session was so positive, and that team going forward. And that's something that person has sort of built into their repertoire on an ongoing basis. But not only to hear it from your manager, but to hear it publicly within the safety of your team environment was very, very powerful.
Yeah. So, Michelle, if we were to stop, start and continue, anything around interactions, what do you think yours would be? What would you recommend people could start doing?
It would really be start giving and receiving feedback. And when I say start, it's almost like, okay, so what does that mean? I just have to tell people what they're good at? I would say have a bit of a model or a process in your head. Have a little bit of skill around it. Don't just sort of blurt out, I want to give you some feedback. I would say do a little bit of research. And we mentioned situation behaviour and the impact that it has. Start there. Start small. When you go for a coffee next time, so it's practice, right? That's what I would start doing. When you go for a coffee next time and you know it's bitter or it's just not enjoyable, practice. And just say, well, actually, I'd like to give you some feedback on this coffee. Start small.
Yeah, or can I give you some feedback around this coffee?
Yeah.
Stop doing?
Well, you tell me, what would you stop doing?
I'd stop thinking the worst and stop avoiding things, because that's what actually stops people, is that they think, if I do that...
this will happen. Assuming.
Yeah, just stop assuming.
Yeah, good.
And continue doing what you think is working for you.
Yeah, like listening to the podcast. So obviously continue learning, growing, and trying to be the best people leader you can be. Before we close off this episode, we just want to remind you that you can get a free copy of the High Performing Team Assessment Tool at peopleleaderspodcast.com, and that's all one word. And if you download and print that, you can follow along as we continue our description of the 8 dimensions and show you how you can turn your team into a high-performing team.
Thank you for joining us on the People Leaders Podcast. For show notes and other resources, please visit us at peopleleaderspodcast.com. If you have a leadership or management question or subject you'd like covered on the podcast, please contact us at podcast@peopleleaders.com.au. The People Leaders Podcast is brought to you by the Experts On Air Podcast Network.